Hi there, and welcome to the Dog Sports Decoded podcast. My name is Megan Ritchie, and I am the host, and today I wanted to talk about off-leash dogs in on-leash areas. This is a pretty contentious one within the dog community, I'll say. Within the sporting community, I think people are pretty one-sided on the opinion that your dog should not be off-leash at an on-leash park or area. But I would say that seems to be contradictory to what either the public thinks or what we see day to day. So while many of us say we hate off-leash dogs in on-leash areas, some of us are obviously doing it or it wouldn't be an issue. So I'm not sure if that's the dog sport community doing it or the members of public doing it, but either way, it's obviously happening and is a big cause of frustration for people. So this topic sort of came up of late. A friend of mine, it's not my story to tell, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, but she was camping with her dogs, and another camper had their dog off leash, which was not allowed. Multiple times she brought the dog back to the owners. They were coming in and harassing her own dogs, and at the end of the day, it eventually caused a fight. So the other dog kind of instigated a fight at her campsite, and then her own dogs kind of went at it. She had to stop her camping trip short, rush back home, and then have sort of an emergency vet visit to get some stitches put in. So kind of on hearing her story, it's something I wanted to talk about for a while, and it just kind of made it clear that it's a good time to talk about it. Kind of has been in my mind for a couple weeks now, and wanted to address it. So it seemed like a good opportunity to do it once I'd kind of sorted out my own thoughts. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it today. I've certainly had my own issues with it. I know I've shared this story before, but Tess certainly can be reactive. Used to take her to dog parks and stuff like that as a puppy, and eventually it became an issue, as many of you I'm sure can relate. So we don't do that anymore, but at the dog park or not, it's certainly been an issue both with her reactivity and just in general. Even Riggs is not particularly reactive. He's an intact male, so sometimes he will decide he does not like other males, but generally he's pretty friendly. But even then, having dogs we don't know come rush us, charge at us, stuff like that is just not very fun. Makes walks in general not very much fun. Kind of ruins our day. So whether it should or shouldn't, that seems to be the impact it has on us. I know if you have a reactive dog, you're always worried, will my dog be blamed for causing a fight or doing something, even if we're within our right, we're, nicely walking down the road, whatever, obeying the law, and then somebody else's dog comes at us off leash. If something does happen and we're not able to prevent a fight, we don't want to see our own dogs be blamed. So it's obviously a contentious issue for a number of reasons, but I thought I'd kind of walk through it in what I hope will be a bit of a constructive way. So I guess I just want to share sort of what my experience has been. So where it's most likely, where you're more likely to find off-leash dogs in on-leash areas. And in my experience, near off-leash parks is probably number one. I live about half a block from an off-leash park, and most of the community seems to think that is a great reason that they don't have to leash their dog anywhere within the community. So it's definitely a big problem in my area. Even just dogs running across the street from the off-leash park, if I'm walking across on the other side of the road. A lot of the off-leash dogs, if their owner can't recall them, or the dogs are just drawn to my dogs, they'll run across the road into the on-leash area, and it'll take a while for the owners to come collect them and bring them back. So definitely near off-leash parks is an issue, even if it's just people, unclipping their dog's leash as soon as they arrive in the car and not bothering to leash them to get to the gate or wherever the off-leash park is. So that's been kind of number one in my experience. The number two place would be any sort of natural park. So to me, this would be city parks. It's often pretty common, again, even if they're on leash areas, city pathways, things like that. But definitely hiking trails, very, very prevalent. So that's something to watch out for. And again, it's one of the reasons I don't enjoy hiking with my dogs anymore. You're just never sure who else is coming down the trail at you or behind you with their dog off leash and what's going to happen. So again, it's kind of impacting others' enjoyment of the environment. So that's kind of number 2. And then lastly, typically seen kind of loose dogs on the owner's property. So they might be very well behaved, just sitting, hanging out on the front porch, something like that, or charging you if they run out the door. They're just not leashed and are loose in the yard. So those are kind of the 3 places I've seen it more frequently happen, but basically that's anywhere. So anywhere you might be taking your dog. So it's pretty hard to avoid. It can happen kind of anywhere, anytime, any place. So while it's easy to criticize people for it, they're certainly in the wrong if their dog is off leash in an on leash area. So it's understandable to have kind of that righteous indignation. But sort of in a constructive way, there has to be a reason people are doing it. So it's very common, it's very prevalent. I think most of the sporting community is very upset about it, but it's kind of a perpetual issue. So there has to be a reason for it. And rather than just criticize the people who are doing it, because I will freely admit I have done it, we need to understand why people are doing it and maybe try and help in a productive way. So that's kind of what I've been spending the week thinking, or a couple weeks thinking about, leading up to kind of collecting my thoughts to do the podcast. So this is sort of what I came up with. So if you have other thoughts, definitely let me know. But this is kind of what came out of my thinking process. So kind of the 2 more common excuses or reasons I've heard, and often they're yelling this at you as their dog is coming at you, but their dog is friendly, or they didn't think anyone was around. So those are certainly the 2 I most commonly hear, but I don't know if those are the real reasons. So I'll say from my own experience, but also just sort of intuitively, what I think the real reasons are poor on-leash manners would be number 1. Number 2, they just enjoy watching their dog running around having fun. I mean, most of us love that side about dogs. They're playful and silly, and we kind of enjoy just watch them play around and have fun. So I think that's another reason people have their dog off leash. And then lastly, maybe they can't go to an off leash park. So maybe there isn't one around them. Their dog isn't friendly with other dogs, so they feel like they can't or shouldn't go. Maybe they're away from home, don't know where an off leash park is, or there's no alternative. And the best example I can give of that is maybe swimming. So if I want to take my dog to go swimming somewhere out in, I'll say in public, but a natural kind of environment, I don't really know of anywhere that's not an off-leash park, which I feel like I can't go to, and that is off-leash. So I guess that's contradictory. But the only place I feel like I can take my dog where we have enough space to kind of be alone and work alone is I'll say a provincial park or federal park, which are all on-leash areas. So if I'm going to a natural environment, it's either going to be city park, provincial park, whatever it is, but they are all on-leash areas. So if I want to take my dog swimming, there's nowhere I can legally take them outside to go swimming other than an off-leash park. And I only know of 2 in my city that actually have kind of that access to water, and they're both extremely, extremely busy. So if you have a reactive type dog, that's obviously not going to work for you. So with those 3 in mind, again, kind of hopefully in a constructive way, if that has been you, that you've had your dog off leash, and maybe these are the reasons why you've had your dog off leash in an on-leash area, maybe give some kind of constructive ways that we can avoid that. So whether that's yourself or neighbors or whatever you're seeing, again, just hopefully adding to maybe a more positive dynamic. So how do we actually solve the root of those issues? So again, I said kind of the number 1 reason we hear is I didn't think anybody was around, or my dog is friendly, so it's okay that my dog's off leash. And it certainly isn't, because you don't know what the other person is facing. I kind of had a funny story about this. So I thought I was in the right. I thought my dog was at an off-leash park. It's kind of a confusing area that you go in and out of off-leash areas within this particular park. It goes along our river pathway system in the Silver Springs area, which if you live in Calgary, you'll know where that is. But the signage is quite confusing. So they've just got like little wooden posts, and it's not always clear like which side of the post is off leash or on leash. And so anyway, I was kind of in this area, and thought I was in an off-leash portion of it, and it ended up I was in an on-leash portion. And there was a kind of an older gentleman, I assume he was a grandpa with their grandkids out, and he was upset, and rightfully so, but I was upset with him because I didn't know I was in the wrong. Didn't know I was in the on-leash portion. And so we're walking and enjoying our little walk, and he kind of got mad at me because his grandkids were scared of kids, and I kind of thought, well, we're in an off-leash park, like I'm allowed to have them off-leash here. And Tess wasn't bothering them, so I didn't think too much about it. But again, I clearly was in the wrong, in hindsight, after looking into it a little bit more on the city website. But so even kind of innocuous things like that, you're not intentionally breaking the rules, but it happens. But I don't think that's the real reason that people have their dog off leash, is just because they didn't think anyone was around or their dog's friendly. I think those are kind of the excuses they yell as they go to collect their dog or whatever. But I don't think that's the real reason the dog is off leash. If their dog is friendly, they can be just as friendly on leash as off leash. So, I don't really think that's the reason behind it. I just think that's the kind of excuse that's thrown out there. So, and there's really nothing. I don't know how you solve those two, even if those were the real reasons, but I don't think that's the case. So I think the real issue here, so I'm just going to kind of look at my notes, so I can keep this a little more concise, is poor leash manners, I think, is probably number one. If your dog is really good on a leash, they have beautifully heel or walk nicely with you, they're not pulling on you, you probably don't really care if your dog is off leash or on leash. You're going to go out and enjoy your walk regardless. So my guess, and probably my own experience, is poor on leash manners is probably the biggest reason behind the dogs being off leash in an on leash area. So again, just kind of an example. I know when Tess was younger, I would take her out hiking with me, and if I thought no one was around, I'd just unclip her and let her go off leash, because she was a pain in the butt on leash when we went hiking. So even if we were, she'd walk reasonably nicely on the sidewalk in the city, as soon as she has all those new smells and scents and tracks to follow and stuff, she'd just get really excited and would pull on the leash. So even if the dog is normally fairly well behaved, as soon as they get into that natural environment, go somewhere new. It doesn't even have to be a natural environment, a new walk in the city. All of a sudden there's new smells, there's new things to check out, and they're just that much more excited and running around and a little more frantic. So I think that's probably the biggest reason. So kind of the number one way we can solve that, that most people would recommend, would of course just be work on the loose leash walking skill. So the best way to address that would simply be to take a loose leash walking course. It's become pretty popular offering. Most training class centers will have some sort of class that offers this. So it might be a special loose leash walking class, maybe one class, or a seminar versus a 6-week course, but it might be a 6-week course. It's also covered in obedience or rally classes, or just like a basic dog obedience type class, puppy class. So any of those should cover kind of loose leash walking. I haven't found those techniques to be super successful for me, I'll say, or very fast for most owners. So as much as I see a lot of owners attending puppy classes now and things like that, which is awesome, it's still something people really struggle with. And I have a hard time saying that they're just not trying hard enough, they're just not doing it. That certainly could be part of it, but it's a big frustration for people to have a dog that doesn't walk nicely on a leash. It's probably the number one reason dogs don't get walked. So I think, I don't want to say you don't want to blame the victim. I don't know if we have, as a training community, have a very good way yet to train that skill that's quick and effective for people to implement. So it's not a knock against anybody or anything. I don't know if we're quite there yet. Some people obviously they're much better trainers than me out there, but professional dog trainers, they can teach it to their own dogs. I don't know how successful we've been able to teach the public at large how to do it with their own dogs. And I know it's something I've struggled with, and I think that's the case for many people. So I've recently come across the Fenzi dog sport method, and she has kind of a circling method she uses, and so far that's kind of the thing I've had the most success with. Works really well with a single dog. I often walk both of my dogs at the same time, so it's not a great method for that. But if you have one dog, I would highly recommend you check that out. I think they occasionally offer it as a webinar. I don't know if it's once a month, but if you can catch that webinar, that's probably what I've had both the fastest and most success with. And again, it's just one of those tough things. Like, I don't think we've quite made it easy enough for people to implement, and maybe it's just going to take a little more outside of the box thinking, because I think it's something people still really struggle with. So number one recommendation: if your dog doesn't walk well on a leash, you can take a class and work on that, obviously. But my personal recommendation, other than trying the Fenzi method, would be to try Canicross, and that's a dog sledding sport where you hook up your dog to a dog sledding X-back type harness or a short harness, and just hook them up to your waist belt. And I really like this solution for hiking, or sometimes we're not a great match for our dogs when it comes to kind of size or strength. So if you had an 80-year-old woman who's 100 pounds soaking wet, and she happens to have a very strong, say, I don't want to make up let's say a Labrador, right? And even if they're a very, nice, well-behaved Labrador, the dog is very strong compared to, I'll say, the 80-year-old lady. And, we just have a bit of a mismatch there. So sometimes if you feel like you're outweighed by your dog or outpowered by your dog, throwing a dog sledding harness on them, hooking them up to a waist belt can be a great option. It's going to reduce chances of injury for yourself, because you're gonna have it on your waist, so it's a lower center of gravity. I think it's stronger at your core, so it's not like your arm that they're gonna be pulling you off, pulling your arm out, or pulling muscles off you, pulling you off balance. And just having a lower center of gravity is going to help you kind of counteract their power. So I really like it from that perspective. But I also think, more importantly, it changes our mindset as we walk them. So if you have them hooked up to a Canicross or a dog sledding harness with a Canicross belt and a waist belt, it's taking the pressure off you. And if your dog pulls you, that's kind of what you want. So all of a sudden, you're not upset that they're pulling you down the trail. You want them to pull you down the trail. So I think it's just that instant relief that your dog's all of a sudden behaving. Like, you could go out tomorrow with your dog sledding harness and your waist belt, and if your dog pulls you down the trail, success. Like, that's it. There's no 6-week class. There's no training every night for an hour or half an hour, spending time on your walk, bringing a bunch of treats, which, if you want to do it. It's something I still work on all the time. It's still not where I want it. But the Canicross and the dog sledding harness just solves that instantly. So if you are that person where you want to go hiking with your dog, and that's where I've seen the most for myself, it's like, you know what, if I just throw that harness on them, clip them to a waist belt, if they pull, great. If they don't, I don't really care either. But my mindset has instantly changed, and I'm not going to come back from that walk mad and frustrated, and my arm is not going to be pulled out. They haven't pulled out my, tricep muscles pulling me in random directions at squirrels. So I think that's just a much more enjoyable and faster solution, if maybe that's why you've been letting your dog off leash in an on-leash area. So again, whether you're going hiking or just around in the city, throwing that harness on them can be a super quick fix and just get you out there having fun with your dog right away. So if loose leash manners walking is your biggest problem, and maybe that's why you're letting your dog off leash when you know you shouldn't, that can be a great solution. All right, so that brings us to number 3, which is, a lot of us, we just really enjoy watching our dogs run around freely and have fun. There's just something in their pure joy of like bouncing around through a field, or kind of frolicking, running from running at trees, chasing squirrels up trees, just running around having a good time. There's just something innately we enjoy watching our dogs do that. So if that's you and that's why you have your dog off leash, even if you know they shouldn't be, how can we turn that around so you can still enjoy that aspect of owning a dog without maybe negatively influencing others that are trying to kind of enjoy their dog how they are able to as well. So the number one way to do that, of course, is just to go to an off-leash park. If your city has one, or a few, we have lots of options here in Calgary. Just go to an off-leash park. That's number one. If your dog's friendly, they're going to have a good time playing with the other dogs. A lot of us here are not big fans of off-leash park that can cause fights and things like that. So I'm guessing that's why you're not going to an off-leash park already, but an off-leash park is certainly an option. So if that doesn't work for you, like I said, maybe you have a reactive dog, or just you've had problems in the past, other dogs have attacked your dog, you're not very comfortable around other dogs or large dogs. I think that's a big reason some people stay away. A private off-leash park, if you have access to one, is a great alternative. So I think around Calgary we have 4 or 5 different options where you can go and rent a private park for anywhere from kind of half an hour to an hour or more, I guess. Usually there's no real limit on how long you can rent it for. But it's a great option, and that's honestly what I've gone to. I still, of course, love to go let my dogs have some freedoms. Some days I don't really feel like training something, or, often for me, if it's really cold, the dogs are kind of crazy anyway. If I hook them up on a leash, we're going too slow to keep them warm, but they're kind of cold, so they got kind of a buzz going on, so they've got a bunch of energy and are extra bouncy, and I'm trying not to slip and fall on the ice and things like that. So on days like that, I really love the off-leash park. I can unclip them. I really don't have to think about much other than watching for maybe some coyotes or something like that, but just let them off leash. They can run around and be idiots and have a great time, and we all go and enjoy kind of an hour or half an hour walking. So private off-leash parks, if you have access to one, is a godsend, really. And just to give you an idea of the cost, I've paid anywhere from kind of $10 to $15 to about $25 for half an hour to an hour. So it's not crazy expensive. It's probably not something you want to do every day. But, if you want to take your dogs out once a week or even once a month, whatever it is, just to go have a really good rip and just enjoy the day. Maybe it's something special for their birthday, whatever it is. But just go have fun if you've got access to an off-leash park in your area. That is a kind of a private option. Then it's just you and your dog or whoever you would like to invite, so you don't have to worry about other dogs attacking your dog or whatever. So it's a great option, and I hope we kind of continue to see that trend. And then lastly, I'd say if you just enjoy kind of seeing your dog have that freedom and fun, is to try a training class. And if you see a dog playing disc or tricks, agility, even canny cross, again, if you wanted to see them run and let out some of that pent up energy. But I love frisbee for that, because if you see the dogs play frisbee, man, they're having fun. If you're throwing tricks in there, that's great. But they can really let loose, run as fast as they can to go catch that frisbee, come back, and you really see that joy in a different way. So it's not kind of the same carefree fun per se, but it's another great way you can see them have that fun, let out that pent up energy, and really just both of you can enjoy it so much the same way. And again, it's not kind of an on-leash thing necessarily, unless you do the canny cross or biking or something with them, but it's just a really good, fun off-leash activity you can both participate in, have a lot of fun with, but again, in a little more contained environment, so you are allowed to be off-leash in that instance. So then I think the last reason, I've kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you feel like you can't go to an off-leash park, again, you have a reactive dog, or you're scared of other people's dogs, again, like some of our seniors have this issue, or even young kids, right? If you're feeling a little more frail or fragile, right? Like a 40-pound kid with a 200-pound Newfie running at them, maybe good cause to be concerned, even if the Newfie does not intend you any harm. There's a big size difference and strength difference there. So if you feel like you can't go to an off-leash park or don't have access to one, and that's why you're letting your dog off-leash in an on-leash area, what are some other alternatives that would kind of solve that problem? So again, a private off-leash park is great if you have that alternative. And I think the hard truth is, if you don't have access to an off-leash park, you really just have to walk your dog on a leash. So unless you're going to a class or something like that where you can let them expend their energy in a different way, bylaws are what they are. And I think a lot of the people, and this was me when I was doing it, and if it's you too, then it's understandable. But if you have other frustrations and feel like you can't walk your dog on a leash, bylaw says you have to. So you just have to find a way to do it. I've kind of been on both sides of that, where I've been frustrated that with my dog not walking nicely on a leash, so I've wanted to let them off leash, but I've also been on the other side where I don't want to quite say be afraid of other dogs coming at me that are off leash, but when I have a reactive dog with me, or just if I have both dogs with me, it's really hard to control both dogs when you've got an off-leash dog approaching you. You don't know what that off-leash dog is going to do. Both of my dogs are rather large, so combined they're probably about 140 to 160 pounds. So like that's a lot for me to kind of hold back, or leashes get tangled. So there's other reasons. It's understandable on both sides why you're frustrated. I understand why the person who lets their dog off leash is doing that. I can also understand why the person with the dogs on leash is frustrated to have an off leash dog approach them. So bylaw is what it is. It says don't have your dog off leash. So I think that's really just the solution. So if you don't have an off-leash park you can go to, you're just going to be forced to walk your dog on leash. So you just need to address whatever issue it is that you have with the on-leash portion. And again, I hope I've outlaid a few different options, whether that's canicross or working on some loose leash walking skills. And then last thing I want to touch on was kind of that swimming thing again. So like I said, there's not really a lot of good natural alternatives. If you want to just go take your dog out to play fetch, go swimming. If you don't, I don't know how to phrase this a little bit better, but everywhere where I can take my dog to a lake or a river to go swimming, basically, is an on-leash area. So there's nowhere I can legally take them to go swimming at a public lake that is off-leash. So what do you do in that instance? And again, kind of bylaw being what it is, it says you can't do that. So if you don't have access to off-leash park that has a waterway, or you can't go to that because your dog or yourself has a concern over the off-leash park, it's the right answer is don't go. I know I have done it with a couple of the local lakes. I've taken the dogs out swimming there off-leash. And if you're going to do that, my suggestion would be like maybe go during off-peak hours, so go early in the morning or later at night, or visit a area that's not very popular, I guess. It doesn't have a lot of people around. And then if somebody does come, you just have to leash your dog right away. So if you are lucky and time it right, maybe you can play by yourself for 20 minutes or something like that with your dog. But really the right answer is don't go use it. So if you do want to see your dog swim and fetch and have some fun that way, which I certainly do, that's a big reason I bought retrievers. I just enjoy going and hanging out and throwing toys for them, playing fetch. So if that's you, I would suggest there's a couple different options. So again, if you can find a private off-leash park that has access to that, that's great. I think there's at least one I know of here in Calgary, and that's Wet Noses. Yes, I guess I should say that. I'll put some links to a few down below, because there's a couple different options. If you live in Calgary, at least you'll have access to them. I can't help you if you don't live in Calgary, but I'll list a few in the description below. But Wet Noses does have access to an irrigation canal, so the dogs can go swim there. It's not quite private. I had a kind of, again, I think it was actually the first time I went there, I thought I thought it was on their property, and somebody was across on the other side walking their dog. So I was kind of ticked off because I'm going like, I paid to rent this thing privately. Why is there this other dog there? And I think it was a local farmer was just walking their dog along the irrigation canal. So so it isn't private in that sense, but that's the only time. I've probably been there 30 times. I've never seen anybody else any other time using that irrigation canal. So it's private in that their facility is private, but the irrigation canal itself is public property or public access. So if you do go there, that's just something another time of righteous indignation there where I was in the wrong. So yeah, so if you have access to an off-leash park that has it, that's great. Otherwise, what can you do? So therapy pools for dogs has been getting more and more popular. Again, will kind of depend how populated an area you're living in. Again, I think Calgary has 2 different pools that I know of that offer some sort of kind of physiotherapy for dogs. So that's a good option. Again, it can get a little pricier because you're paying for the therapist as well as the pool time, but it's a good option too if it's kind of local to you. You can take your dog. Often they'll let you play fetch and just give your dog a chance to swim. So that's a good option. The other option is dock diving. So it's definitely a sport I've recently become addicted to. But dock diving is a great option. Again, it's allowed there. The facility is specifically for dogs. So you can kind of have at it. You obviously have to rent the pool and pay for it and blah, 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 blah. But if you have a dog that loves to retrieve and you don't have anywhere you feel that you can safely take them to do that, again, where it's legal, a dock diving pool is a great option. You can go rent it for half an hour, play fetch. You'll have fun. Your dog will have fun. So it's a great way to get kind of that same outlet without irritating other dog owners and coming in conflict with the city bylaws or provincial bylaws or what have you. So yeah, I know this is a really contentious issue, and I know myself included, but a lot of people are very upset when they see off-leash dogs in on-leash areas. But I think it helps to understand why people are doing it and approaching it from that aspect. That story I shared kind of in the opening with a friend at the campsite, I don't understand that one as much. I don't think there's a whole lot of, like, were they just being inconsiderate? Did they not care? I don't know. I have a hard time thinking anybody would really just say like, oh, I don't care if my dog attacks another dog. So I have a hard time believing that was their reasoning, but I can't really think of a good reason other than, maybe the dog, if they were tethered to a spike or something in the ground, was just getting tangled up in chairs and getting in the way. Not too sure. I have a harder time thinking my way around an issue like that. Where to me, like, okay, well, if you're not willing to contain your dog with a tether or in your camper or whatever the story is, the right answer is, well, then you need to leave your dog at home with a dog sitter or at a kennel or with a friend or whatever. If you're not willing to take care of your own dog in a way that allows other people to enjoy the same privileges you're hoping to enjoy, there's not a lot of reasoning or rationale behind that. But again, kind of just growing pains. Like when I had first got Tess, she was my first dog to kind of own and take care of on my own after I'd moved out. So there's a lot of growing pains with that. So if you're finding yourself in that position where like you thought you'd get this dog and you were going to take it to the off-leash park and play fetch, and now you can't do that, so you're finding yourself going to on-leash areas and letting your dog off-leash. I've been there, I've done it, so, not proud of it in hindsight, but I can understand why people do it. So, I'm really just hoping this podcast gives you some alternative ways to solve that problem. Without impacting other people's enjoyment of their own dogs. Because I think that's the saddest part to me, is really what we're seeing is other dogs are stopping dog owners from enjoying their own dogs. So if you own a dog and you're afraid to take it for a walk because, every time you guys go out, you're attacked by an off-leash dog, that's not a real good recipe for continued dog ownership down the road. And I think it's sad if we're robbing each other enjoyment of our dogs. So I hope this podcast helps if you are, I don't want to say the instigator, but if you have been that person that's let your dog off leash in an on-leash area, I hope this gives you a few different ideas of how you can address that. And on the other side, if you are constantly seeing family members or friends or neighbors doing something they shouldn't, I hope this kind of gives you maybe some understanding as to why they're doing it, and maybe some things you can suggest to them in a positive way to stop it, rather than, we all have a tendency to just kind of, I don't want to say lose our heads, but we all go home ranting and raving, and rather than ranting and raving at our neighbors, maybe you can suggest one of these alternatives to them. Maybe it's a more constructive way to do it. As at the end of the day, we all just want to enjoy being with our dogs and give them the best life we can. As the saying goes, I work hard so my dog can have a better life. So I hope this helps. And with that, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch up with you guys next week.